The red bottle. It was just like any other Christmas party. The usual mix of neighbors, friends, and colleagues gathered at Tom and Misty's place. They never failed to host a grand event. We had recently moved to the area, and my wife Wendy had a long-standing friendship with Misty. They had worked together at Wendy's first job, and I had come into the picture later, leading us to marriage. This party marked our 5th consecutive year attending since our wedding. I was a bit concerned about Wendy, especially since she had given birth to our first child, Jeannie, just a few months back. This was one of our first big social gatherings post-baby. During the last party, Wendy was still recovering, adjusting to motherhood, and cautious about alcohol consumption due to breastfeeding. We had hosted a small barbecue at our place in mid-November, but it was a low-key affair. Being around close friends in our home, I felt at ease even when Wendy indulged a bit. She deserved it after such a long break. Tom's house was enormous, typical of our gated community. The party was spread out in every possible space: kitchen, living room, media room, and even the garage and backyard. I had been wandering around, searching for Wendy. An hour earlier, she seemed in high spirits, though not heavily drinking. She had been careful, considering the doctor's advice about alcohol and breastfeeding. She had even prepared by pumping milk in advance to ensure she didn't need to nurse Jeannie for a while after the party. I wanted to keep an eye on her, as she sometimes got a bit too lively when she drank. The party was in full swing, with everyone enjoying the festive atmosphere. Eventually, I found her in a corner, quietly observing the party, something we both enjoyed. My worries eased as I saw her sitting there, just taking in the scene. I joined her, sitting close and asking if she was enjoying herself. She mentioned she had stopped drinking as it was affecting her more than expected. But as I leaned in closer, I noticed something off about her. Her behavior seemed unusual. "What's going on, Wendy?" I asked, surprised by the change in her demeanor. Her expression was one of confusion. "What?" she asked. I leaned in close, almost touching her face, and she instinctively puckered up for a kiss. I took a deep breath. There was no mistaking it. "Who have you been with?" I whispered sharply. What?" She stuttered, her face betraying her guilt. I got up, took her by the wrist, and started moving towards the door. I heard laughter behind me and glanced back, seeing 4 guys, including Tom, looking overly pleased with themselves. Anger boiled inside me. "Stop, John," she pleaded, "you're hurting me." I didn't listen, pushing her out the door and shutting it firmly behind us. She stood defiantly, arms crossed. "I'm not going anywhere with you in this state." "Fine, stay. I'll start the divorce process tomorrow," I retorted and walked away. She hurried after me in her heels. "What divorce? What are you talking about? If you prefer their company, so be it. You know my stance on infidelity. Don't come back to my house." She caught up and grabbed my arm. "John, please. You're frightening me." "You should have considered the consequences before," I said coldly. "Tom's your friend," she tried to reason. "No, he's not. He's the person you betrayed me with. I won't let it slide next time I see him." She tugged at my arm, but I was too angry to care. "John, I've never been unfaithful. You know that." I continued walking, frustrated and hurt. "How could you?" She released my arm, standing there as I rounded the car. Wendy had always been expressive in our intimate moments, enjoying the closeness and the sensory aspects. This was something we shared, an aspect of our relationship that was uniquely ours. She had a way of making these moments playful and intimate, a part of our private world. But now, that private world felt shattered. I had received calls at work from her before, telling me she was still thinking about our intimate morning moments. Those calls always brightened my day, and sometimes I even rushed home during lunch for another close moment with her. I cherished the look on her face after those moments, a mix of satisfaction and mischief. But tonight, seeing that same expression, I didn't recognize it at first. It was only when I caught the scent on her breath that realization dawned. I unlocked the car and got in. "I don't have my purse or coat," she said. "You can go back and get them, or get in the car. It's your choice." She got into the car, visibly upset, and slammed the door. "Why are you being so difficult? It was just a moment of intimacy. Just a moment of intimacy." I yelled back at her. "Do you not understand the significance? Get out of the car." "No." She resisted, holding onto the door handle. "I wasn't unfaithful. I would never do that to you. Go back to them then. I don't care anymore." "You've betrayed our trust," I retorted. Tears were in her eyes. "Why do you say you don't care when you're so angry?" "I don't care what you do anymore. You've destroyed our marriage with your actions," I said, driving the short distance to our home. "It was just a moment of intimacy," she cried out. "I had past relationships before we got married. That's all it was, a brief lapse. I didn't cheat. I was faithful. Before we were married," I reminded her. "That was before you made a commitment to me. Now, it just feels like betrayal. I haven't been unfaithful. I keep telling you that. Why won't you believe me? I never lie to you. I'm not lying now." "How many times has this happened?" I asked her. "How many what?" she asked, her voice tinged with nervousness. I pressed, needing to know the extent of what happened. "You mentioned others. How many tonight?" She hesitated, and I couldn't contain my frustration, expressing it loudly as we pulled into our driveway. "How many tonight?" I repeated, striving to remain calm. "2," she whispered. And who were they? I asked, seeking specifics. She refused to name anyone else, fearing my reaction. You shouldn't confront Tom. He's not to blame. I was adamant. Then you can stay outside or return to the party. You're not welcome in the house now. It's my house too, she protested. I disagreed, feeling betrayed. It ceased being your home when you broke our marriage vows. And considering a restraining order, exiting the car, I headed to the back entrance, her heels clicking behind me. Please, John, this is senseless. I blocked her entry at the door. Am I senseless for expecting fidelity from my wife? She finally admitted, Gerard. The other one was Gerard. I couldn't believe her casual attitude. You think it's all right that you were with two of our friends tonight? She tried to justify, they're our friends, not strangers. I expressed my hurt and embarrassment. Friends, you've humiliated me, tarnished our marriage and reputation. How could you? She attempted to reassure me, they respect you. They're envious of our relationship. I questioned the frequency of our own intimate moments, feeling deeply upset. Yesterday, she replied promptly. To conclude, you treated me like you did them. No, you were eager for more. Of course I was eager. I've missed it for over 5 months. Of course, I wanted more. I expressed my frustration. When was the last time you were intimate with me? I questioned again. Last week, she responded uncertainly. Really, I don't recall that. When was it? She seemed to ponder. I can't remember. 3 weeks ago, last Wednesday. No, I'm sure it was more recent, she contested. 3.5 weeks. You haven't been intimate with me since we resumed our relationship. She moved closer, trying to reach for me, but I brushed her hand away. I thought you were content with what we had. You seemed so pleased. I was content until I realized my wife was being intimate with others, while neglecting me. You've been unfair. She shook her head. I have always been there for you. You know I enjoy our intimacy. It's wonderful. I swear, I cherish it. I love you. But you did neglect me. Many times. Do you want me to remind you? Your thoughts were elsewhere, probably with others. Her tears started flowing again. They're not significant to me, and I've always been there for you. Our relationship is strong. Everyone admires it. I grabbed a scotch from the cabinet and poured a strong one. Right, and how would everyone know about our relationship? She blushed. You know, we women discuss things. Everyone's envious. Both men and women. Great. They're aware of our personal issues. They know I'm not fulfilling my wife's needs, and she seeks comfort elsewhere. With people like Tom and Gerard. Gerard, really? Wendy, is there anything else you want to reveal? Anything else to undermine what we've built? She stormed out of the room, clearly upset. Forget it, John. Why are you overreacting to a one-time mistake? I watched her retreat to the bedroom, closing the door. I couldn't believe what was happening. Determined, I followed her, but found the door locked. Open this door, I demanded, kicking it in frustration, damaging the frame. She was sitting on the bed, looking scared. This is my room too. You can't lock me out. You should leave, I said, unable to contain my anger. You're overreacting, John. You're going to regret this, she retorted, throwing her shoes in my direction, missing me entirely. Wendy left the room in tears, and I shut the door with a bang. I lay on the bed, overwhelmed with emotion. The betrayal was too much to bear. I spent a restless night, plagued by distressing thoughts. I couldn't escape the images in my mind, wondering if I'd ever be able to move past this. Exhausted and unhappy, I eventually got up and took a shower, but it did little to ease my mind. I found Wendy in the kitchen, her gaze cold. I poured myself some coffee and grabbed a slice of bread, hoping to calm my stomach. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. Ready to talk now? She asked. Yes, I've decided. I'll start the divorce proceedings on Monday. I'll provide child support, but there won't be any alimony. We've been married too briefly. We'll split our assets and sell the house, I explained, trying to keep my composure. We're not splitting anything, she protested. We have to. The house will go on the market. As for our child, I can't be sure of anything anymore, I admitted, feeling a profound sense of loss and disillusionment. I didn't betray you. Please believe that, she pleaded. Did you have a close moment with Tom? I asked, trying to remain composed. Yes, I did, but that's all it was, she admitted. And with Gerard, I continued, struggling to keep my calm. She looked frustrated. Yes, but it was just that. He never went further. Who else? I need to know who else, I insisted, sipping my coffee, trying to maintain my strength in the face of her actions. Why does it matter so much? I promise you, it wasn't betrayal. I need to know who to confront, whose actions have hurt me deeply. John, you're scaring me. Please calm down. We can get through this. Nothing's beyond repair. I pressed on. Who else? Wendy. Who else did you get intimate with? She sighed. Aaron. Just Aaron. Tom 3 times, Aaron once, and Gerard once. That's it. Just some foolish acts, and you're reacting so strongly. I wish you hadn't, I said, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. We can get lawyers, or settle this amicably, like the Penningtons did. I won't cite infidelity. I want joint custody if Jeannie is indeed my daughter. I don't want a divorce, she said, looking desperate. I didn't either, I replied. But we can't let this drag on. Our daughter will suffer the most. Let's keep it simple, all right? I don't want to argue anymore. Clearly, there's a problem I wasn't aware of. I'm sorry for whatever I did that led you to this. I loved you." She was on the verge of tears. "John, please, we're not getting a divorce. Jeannie is your daughter, and I've never been unfaithful. I love you, and I know you love me. This is just a misunderstanding. How can you say it's not betrayal? You were intimate with others, several times, and you might have continued if I hadn't found out. Please, just be honest, so we can move forward. I won't use this as the reason for our divorce. I didn't sleep with them. It was just a brief moment of intimacy, not even 5 minutes. How many times do I need to tell you?" she exclaimed in frustration. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was she really not understanding the gravity of the situation? I went to her, took her hand, and led her to the living room, asking her to sit down. She followed, still holding my hand. I decided to call my mother, putting the phone on speaker. "Hi, Mom. Can you watch Jeannie a bit longer today? Wendy and I need to sort out some things." "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" my mom asked, always perceptive. "Just some issues we need to address. Can you keep her until this evening? I'll call you before we pick her up." "Of course, I love spending time with her. Are you sure everything's okay?" "We'll talk later, Mom," I replied, ending the call. Wendy watched as I dialed another number. Misty, Tom's wife, answered after a few rings. "Hey, Misty, sorry we left your party early. It was quite an event." She sounded concerned. "What happened? Tom mentioned you left abruptly around midnight. Is everything okay?" "Wendy's here with me. You're on speaker," I informed her. Misty sounded puzzled. "What's happening?" I asked her directly. "Misty, what's your view on what constitutes cheating in a marriage?" Wendy interjected with surprise. "John." Misty sounded shocked and worried. "Oh no, John, you didn't betray her, did you? Please say you didn't." "No, I haven't been unfaithful. I'm just trying to clarify something. Where does innocent flirting end and betrayal begin?" I asked Misty. She hesitated. "What happened? Can you just help us out? As her close friend, what do you think counts as cheating?" Misty sounded uncertain. "Well, anything physically intimate, I suppose. It could even be emotional betrayal, deciding to pursue someone else. Could you be more specific about what you mean by physically intimate?" "This is awkward, John. Shouldn't you talk to Tom about this?" "No, I don't want to talk to him," I said, my tone sharp. Misty sounded concerned. "They didn't do something, did they?" I pressed for her definition. "When is it cheating?" She replied reluctantly, "Well, any involvement of intimate body parts, I guess. What about through clothing? Or touching someone's behind?" She seemed to try to downplay it. "Some casual touches aren't necessarily cheating. Like a pat on the back or a quick hug. That's normal among friends, right? And what about more intimate acts? Would those be cheating?" Misty sounded incredulous. "Of course, any touching of private areas, especially without clothing, is definitely cheating. Even if it's over clothing, it's not appropriate if it's intimate. So, if it was direct contact and someone got carried away, that's cheating." I sought confirmation. "Yes, John, that's definitely crossing the line," she affirmed. I thanked her, feeling a mix of emotions. "Sorry to bother you, Misty. We'll talk later." I ended the call and turned to face my wife, the weight of the conversation heavy between us. Wendy seemed unapologetic. "That's just her opinion. She doesn't even have that kind of intimacy with Tom. She doesn't understand." I reached out to 6 more of her friends, receiving similar opinions, with some noting exceptions like mutual agreement between spouses, separation, or coercion. "They're not right," Wendy insisted. "It's not cheating if there's no risk of pregnancy. So, by your logic, certain intimate acts don't count as cheating." I questioned. She hesitated. "That's not exactly what I meant, but that's the implication of your argument. If pregnancy isn't a risk, it's not cheating. So, using protection or birth control would mean it's not cheating." She grew frustrated. "You're twisting my words. I'm trying to understand your definition of cheating," I said. "What is it to you?" She replied, "Actual intercourse. That's cheating. And other intimate acts." I probed. She conceded. "Well, I suppose those could be considered cheating too, but not oral intimacy." I asked. She tried to justify. "That's different. It's not the same as love. Certain parts of the body are private, for you and me only. But the mouth is different. It's visible, used for everyday things. Like kissing." I asked. "Yes, we kiss family members and friends. It's not the same." "And what about a man's intimate parts?" I continued. She agreed. "Yes, those are private. But unless there's full intimacy, it's different. So, if I were to be intimate with someone else, but avoid certain acts, you wouldn't consider that cheating?" I asked, trying to make sense of her reasoning. "It absolutely is cheating. That's intimate and private, only for you. Why would you even consider that when you have me?" "I'm willing to do whatever you want," she said, clearly missing the point of my hypothetical question. I was astounded by her logic. "So, being intimate with a woman is cheating, but with a man, it's not. That's your reasoning." She seemed exasperated. "You know it's different. If I don't see it as cheating, then it's not. You should see it the same way." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I picked up the phone again, dialing a number. Wendy's expression changed to one of concern. "Wendy," came the voice from the phone. "Mom," Wendy replied, her voice tinged with anxiety. "Hi Carol, it's John," I said. Carol sounded worried. "What's happening? Is Jeannie okay?" "No, she's fine. We just need your opinion on something, I explained. Of course, anything, Carol said, willing to help. We're trying to understand something. What would you consider cheating in a marriage? Carol's tone changed to one of alarm. Why are you asking? John, you didn't do anything to hurt her, did you? No, I haven't been unfaithful. We're just trying to get on the same page. What's your take on cheating? She hesitated before answering. Well, times are different now. Flirting and teasing seem much more common. It's not like it used to be. There are so many ways to communicate now, with emails, texts, and online interactions. So, physical intimacy is still off limits. I clarified. Carol was quick to respond. What have you done? Nothing, Carol. I assure you, I've done nothing wrong. I'm just trying to understand Wendy's perspective. Sleeping outside of marriage is not okay, and you know it. Carol exclaimed with frustration. Wendy, you can't just let things slide. There have to be boundaries. Mom, Wendy replied, sounding weary, it was just a minor thing, not a serious issue, right? Carol's tone grew harsh. John, what have you done? Are you responsible for this mess? If Ed finds out, you need to leave that house immediately, you deceitful man. I always suspected something like this might happen. You, with your fancy job, surrounded by attractive co-workers. Was it one of them, Wendy? I could see Wendy's eyes filling with tears. Mom, there's been no infidelity. John hasn't done anything wrong. We're just trying to set clear boundaries. Carol was not convinced. Don't lie for him, Wendy. Don't let him make you believe this is acceptable. I bet he's using the excuse of your pregnancy, isn't he? That's no reason for infidelity. We women have to recover after childbirth. It's a part of starting a family. Despite the tense situation, I couldn't help but find Carol's outburst slightly amusing, given how rare it was for her to swear. Carol, I haven't done anything wrong. This is something Wendy and I need to resolve between us. Wendy, is he telling the truth? Carol asked, seeking confirmation. He's right, Mom. He's not at fault, Wendy said, trying to reassure her mother. Carol's reaction shifted from anger to shock. Oh no, Wendy, you didn't. Tell me it's not true. John, you must understand, she loves you. This has to be some sort of misunderstanding. Think about your daughter. You have to forgive her. I interrupted Carol's plea. Carol, we'll talk later. Wendy will call you. I ended the call, not wanting to listen to any more of her one-sided defense. In her eyes, if I were unfaithful, I'd be the worst kind of person, but her daughter was just misunderstood. I thought that was the end of it, but Wendy quickly snatched the phone from me and dialed a number. Hey, how was the party? Did you have fun? The voice on the other end greeted. Wendy shot me a defiant look. Quick question, blowjobs aren't cheating, right? Absolutely not. That's common knowledge, the voice replied confidently. I intervened. Hey Alice, it's John. Could you let your husband know your views on this? I'm sure he'd be interested. The line went silent. Wendy was puzzled. That was strange, she said, redialing. The call connected but was quickly cut off. Why would she hang up? Wendy murmured, visibly unsettled. She tried again, only to find the line busy. That's odd, they have call waiting. She sank back into the couch, looking worried. It doesn't matter. You heard her. It's not a big deal. I questioned her. Do you think Dave would agree? Wendy seemed thoughtful. Look, it's not important. I didn't see it as cheating, but I understand now you do. I apologize. It won't happen again. I asked her directly, would you have done that in front of me? Or in front of Misty? Wendy often acted without fully considering the consequences. No, that would be embarrassing, she responded quickly. I wanted her to really think about her actions. Before you respond, think about this. If you wouldn't do it in my presence, then it's a form of betrayal. Consider that. Actions you hide are not actions you should be taking. Wendy took a moment to reflect on what I had said, remaining silent as she pondered. I waited patiently, giving her space to process her thoughts. After some time, she acknowledged my point. Okay, I understand now. I didn't think it was something you'd be interested in, but if you want, I could be more open about it next time. Maybe it'll even help set boundaries, so there's no pressure for anything more. If you're okay with it, I am too. I was stunned by her response. The idea of a next time was too much for me. Feeling overwhelmed, I walked away, needing space, as she called after me, John. We need to discuss this. I want to fix things, her voice fading as I shut the door behind me. At work, I tried to distract myself by focusing on tasks at hand. My mind, however, kept drifting to strategies for dealing with those who had been inappropriate with Wendy. I had to be cautious, considering my job's sensitive nature and the government contracts involved. Jail was not an option. Even after immersing myself in work, I couldn't shake off the unease. Wendy and I were at an impasse, and it seemed like she couldn't grasp why her actions were so problematic. I couldn't help but believe that she genuinely didn't see the gravity of her actions. It wasn't malice or disregard for our family. She seemed to lack an understanding of the consequences. Her sister Alice's influence, especially during and after Wendy's pregnancy, now seemed more significant. Our relationship had always been full of affection and physical intimacy. Wendy was always expressive in her love, especially in the bedroom, often initiating intimate moments. This was consistent until her pregnancy. During the pregnancy, especially the later stages, Wendy required bed rest, and I, along with her mother and sister, took care of her. Alice had been a regular presence during this time, a friendly and seemingly happily married woman who enjoyed light flirting, but nothing that had ever concerned me until the recent phone call. Post-pregnancy, our intimate life was initially on hold, but then Wendy became almost overly eager, as if making up for lost time. It was only after 6 weeks, following the doctor's clearance, that our physical relationship began to return to normalcy. But now, with recent events, everything felt uncertain. I had been abstaining from intimate relations for several months, and after Wendy gave birth, our physical relationship gradually resumed. I noticed a change in her, which is common after childbirth, but it didn't diminish my enjoyment or love for her. Wendy had her preferences in our intimate life, and I respected them. She wasn't keen on certain acts, but that was a minor thing, and I never pressured her about it. However, the recent argument made me realize how much less frequent our intimate moments had become. Perhaps I was partly to blame. I often got carried away with my desires, neglecting to consider what Wendy enjoyed most. I hadn't been attentive to her needs, and we hadn't communicated effectively about it. In retrospect, I felt I had let her down in some ways. Better communication might have helped. The thought of going home was daunting. I was still upset about her indiscretion and the realization that she had been intimate with others. It had been a while since we had been close, and the change from a frequent intimate routine to nothing was jarring. I was angry with Tom, Gerard, Aaron, and the others. They were all married, yet they crossed a line with Wendy. I felt they deserved some form of retribution. While out for dinner, I switched on my phone and saw a flood of messages. I listened to some, deleting them as I went. There were several from Wendy, her mother, Misty, and even my own mother. The situation was spiraling out of control. Despite my anger and talk of divorce, I couldn't deny my deep love for Wendy. I wanted to return to how things were, but knew that meant distancing ourselves from the group we had been associating with. I couldn't face them after what had happened. While eating, I decided to text Wendy. I wasn't ready for a conversation, but I wanted to prevent the situation from worsening. I informed her that I was at work, trying to distract myself, and now having dinner out. Shortly after finishing my dinner coffee, I received a text from Wendy. It was brief and heartfelt. "Please hurry home. I love you. I'm sorry." Her message was straightforward, but it left me conflicted. I kept thinking about the situation. It didn't feel like a typical affair. I didn't sense that Wendy had stopped loving me or deliberately sought to disrespect me. But her insistence that her actions were inconsequential baffled me. Despite the obvious disapproval from everyone else, she stuck to her argument. I wondered if she understood the gravity of her actions but was just avoiding responsibility. Driving through DC at night was always a solace for me. The quiet streets, the illuminated monuments, and the serene views around the reflecting pool and the mall offered a momentary escape. I stopped at a bar, still reluctant to go home. I pondered over our situation, wondering if we could overcome this, or if it would be easier to just walk away. Could I ever look at Wendy the same way again? Thoughts of Jeannie, my 3-month-old daughter, filled my mind. The memory of holding her for the first time, surrounded by family in the hospital, was vivid. Her tiny fingers, her expressive face, she was a part of me, our creation. Losing that connection was unthinkable. I knew I had to try to reconcile with Wendy to help her understand my perspective and work through the denial. Relocation might be necessary, but if it meant preserving our family, it was a price I was willing to pay. I ignored attempts from others at the bar to engage in conversation, focusing instead on my drinks and my thoughts. The text tone for incoming messages chimed. I had ignored several calls, but this text was from Wendy again. "Are you coming home? I miss you. I'm sorry." I believed she was genuinely remorseful, not just for being caught, but for causing harm to our relationship. Yet, I sensed she still saw me as the one being unreasonable. I replied, "Soon. I love you too. Kiss Jeannie for me." Her response was prompt, informing me that Jeannie was at her mother's house. I settled my tab and headed to my car, checking to ensure I was sober enough to drive. After a few hours and a couple of drinks, I felt a slight buzz but believed I was fit to drive safely. As I drove through 14th Street, I was struck by the changes over the years. This area, once notorious for its unsavory establishments and the dirty workers who frequented its corners, had undergone significant urban renewal. Gone were the dirty movie parlors and the blatant solicitation that marked my teenage years. I recalled a vivid memory from my youth when a woman had boldly approached our car at a stoplight. Her actions brazen and shocking to me as a teenager. My friend Ralph, who was in the backseat, had reacted with laughter and a bit of mischief, a typical response for our age at the time. The streets had changed, but as I neared 11th and L, I noticed that some remnants of the past lingered. The workers had simply relocated, now ironically close to the Department of Justice building. At a stoplight, a young woman tapped on my window, her appearance weary and hopeful. I rolled down the window, driven by a mix of curiosity and nostalgia. She offered her services in a hesitant manner, revealing her meagerly clad figure. Her youthfulness prompted me to question her age. Surprisingly, she blushed, a response I wouldn't have expected in such a situation. She quickly assured me she was of legal age and seemed cautious, possibly fearing law enforcement. Her request to get into the car seemed risky, but her desperation was evident. She seemed in need of money, her eyes hinting at tears. The cold night had left her shivering, dressed in clothes hardly suitable for the weather. Allowing her into my car wasn't a decision driven by desire, it was the sight of her vulnerability and hardship that moved me. She seemed to represent a harsh reality that was far removed from the life I knew. Her entry into the car, tentative and cautious, was a stark reminder of the different paths life can take. In the car, or do you have somewhere else in mind? She inquired. Don't you have a usual spot for your clients? I asked. She shook her head. I work independently. I don't want anyone controlling me or taking my earnings. Have you been doing this for a long time? My curiosity was piqued, even as I questioned my own actions. She gave a small smile. Looks like you're into chatting, huh? How about $20 just for my time? As I drove along Massachusetts Avenue, I assured her, you won't leave empty-handed. She quickly clarified, this isn't a transaction, you know. I haven't offered anything specific. Don't worry, I'm not law enforcement. How old are you? She looked incredibly young. Handing over her driver's license, she revealed, I turned 18 last October. Happy now. She seemed slightly irked as she put away her license before I could get a good look. I asked, somewhat impulsively, what do you charge for a quick service? She replied, $20 for a quick one. For something more special, it's $50. I couldn't help but chuckle softly. I doubt you can surpass my wife's skills. She seemed puzzled. Then why ask? I turned the heat up for her comfort and continued driving towards the suburbs. My wife doesn't consider it a big deal to be intimate with others. She grinned at this. Well, it seems you found the right person for some harmless fun. How about $200 for an evening of just hanging out? I was taken aback by her proposition and the stark contrast of this situation to my usual life. I found myself unexpectedly charmed by her. Despite her rough exterior, she had a sense of humor and a certain confidence. You jumped from $20 to $50 and now $200. That's a big leap, I commented. She responded with a pout, an escort would be way more expensive and not nearly as fun. I guarantee it. The cost wasn't a major issue for me. Wendy regularly spent a substantial amount on her hair appointments. She always had her own way of spending, which I never minded. We had the means, and she had always seemed worth it, at least until now. I noticed the girl watching me, and then I heard her stomach growl. She seemed embarrassed. Are you hungry? I asked. She brushed off the concern. I'm okay. So, are we doing this? I can lower it to $150 for the whole night. As she reached out and touched my thigh, trying to be seductive, I covered her hand with mine, giving it a gentle squeeze. You shouldn't undersell yourself. You're doing fine. I believe you're worth the $200. She offered a proposition. How about a bet? I'll do it for $100. If it's the best you've ever had, you pay me what you think it's worth afterward. If not, it's just the 100. This sparked an idea in me, and I smiled. I took out my wallet and handed her a mix of bills totaling $200. There's something a bit different I have in mind, I said, watching her expression change from nervous to intrigued as I explained my plan. What's your name? She asked suddenly. Call me John, I replied. She insisted, your real name. I showed her my ID. It's John. She laughed at the irony. Weird night, John the John. You've got that right. I just wanted to cool off and get some work done, maybe have a quiet dinner. And now, here I am with you, Kelly. Definitely not how I planned my evening, I said, reflecting on the unexpected turn of events. Kelly seemed thoughtful. You seem like a decent guy, John. It's refreshing. And it's sweet how you're still trying to work things out with your wife. Why haven't you just left her? I was curious about her too. What's your name again? It's Kelly. Amethyst is just a name for work. You saw my license. I nodded. Kelly, I can't just leave. I love my wife, and my daughter means everything to me. I don't want to lose them. She seemed to understand. Your wife is lucky, and honestly, she's pretty foolish for risking what she has with you. A good man, with a good job, who's kind and in love. She doesn't know how good she has it. As we drove past Rock Creek Park, I asked her if she was comfortable with my plan. I'm up for it, she replied. I'll do whatever you need. I couldn't help but ask about her life. How did you end up in this situation, instead of being in school? Kelly looked away, her expression changing. Bad luck, some wrong choices. I can call your wife foolish because I've been there. I made mistakes, and now I'm dealing with the consequences. I'm here to listen if you want to talk about it, I offered. She glanced at me. Maybe another time. Right now, let's just enjoy the moment. I don't want to dwell on the past or worry about the future. Let's just have a good time. Kelly made herself comfortable in the seat, her heels pressing into the leather. I didn't mind. She then asked me about my wife's skills, wanting to know what made her so good. I explained as we entered my neighborhood. It's not about technique with her. It's her enthusiasm, the way she gets into it. She's passionate about it, loves every aspect of it. It's how she looks at me, the excitement, the connection. She's completely engaged in the moment. Kelly listened intently as I shared these intimate details, a far cry from our earlier conversation. Despite the complexity of my feelings, I found myself opening up to this stranger in my car. Kelly's comment about the frequency of my wife's affections made me chuckle. Yeah, she's always been generous, but it's always one at a time. She responded with a playful tone, well, that's about to change. I'll make sure you're thoroughly satisfied, over and over. Glancing at me, she noticed my reaction and gave a sweet laugh. Seems like you're excited about the idea, she said, lightly touching me. As I pulled into the driveway, I noted it was past 1:30 a.m. and the house lights were still on. This situation might get a bit unusual. Are you sure you're okay with this? I asked her. Kelly nodded, her expression sincere. I'd do it for free if I didn't need the money. I hope this helps you somehow. The door was unlocked, so we walked in. Wendy immediately rushed to embrace me, tears in her eyes. I was so worried you'd leave. I love you so much. We can move past this, she said, full of hope. Gently disengaging from her embrace, I gave her a quick kiss. As I stepped in, Kelly followed. Wendy's shock was evident as she saw Kelly. What? Who is this? Wendy stammered. Kelly, with surprising grace, stepped forward and hugged my wife. Hi Wendy, you're even prettier than John described. Thanks for having me over. She looked around the house appreciatively. It's a lovely home. Did you decorate it yourself? Wendy, still reeling from the shock, managed to reply, I did the decorating. The tension in the air was palpable as Wendy tried to process the unexpected presence of Kelly in our home. Kelly's compliment about Wendy's decorating skills seemed genuine. She wandered through our living room, admiring the furnishings and artwork with an astute eye. Is this an original? She inquired, looking at a painting over the fireplace. Wendy responded, yes, it was an anniversary gift. That painting was a significant investment, a symbol of my affection for Wendy. Kelly continued to praise our home decor, even identifying the origin of our rug, much to Wendy's surprise. It's Tibetan. We got it on a trip to Lhasa. You have exquisite taste, Kelly complimented before asking for the restroom. As she left, she gave Wendy another hug and a kiss on the cheek, saying, we're going to have a great time. Thank you. I watched, somewhat in disbelief at Kelly's approach. She was exceeding my expectations in playing her role. In the kitchen, I started preparing a snack tray, trying to offer some hospitality to Kelly. Wendy followed me, her voice low but filled with tension. What are you doing, John? Bringing her into our home. I focused on arranging the snacks and chose a bottle of fine wine. Just being a good host to our guest. She's not a guest, John, Wendy protested, her voice strained. I don't want her here. My comment, what would you think will happen between John and Wendy? Comment down below and I will see you in part 2.